Can you hear me?
(13th). We are not going to have one of our commissioners here today. Everyone else is here. The first thing we'll do is we'll approve the agenda, but we do have some amendments we're going to make due to the timing of when people are available. I'm going to make those suggestions now. So the first thing that we're going to do is we want to maximize our time with the city attorney, who has to leave in a little bit. So we're going to move that item, new business item C, discussion of conflicts of interest, to the very, very, very top of the meeting. And then we are going to move the approval of the minutes and citizens' comments matters not on the agenda right after that. And then we're going to proceed with items D and E of new business, and F and G. I didn't see the second page, it's a big one. And then we will do the electing vice chairperson and the chairperson at the very, very end of the meeting. So we're just reshuffling all the items so that we can get the discussion with conflicts of interest out of the way now. Do any other comments or concerns before we sign off on that?
I'm going to follow your lead.
Okay, yeah. Again, yeah. So again, we are going to item C of new business, then item 3, then item 4, then go back into new business, but save items A and B till the very end of new business.
Thank you.
Okay.
You want a motion?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. A motion to, how long have I been on the commission? To amend the agenda as described by the chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great.
Does
So-
that mean we approved the agenda, or that we just agreed to modify it? So we're going to say that's
That was the
approving
approval.
agenda.
That was the
Okay.
approval of the modified
Good,
agenda.
Good. Okay.
Okay, we're not going back. All right, let's go to item C, discussion of conflicts of interest.
Can y'all hear me okay?
Maybe we could turn the speakers up a little bit.
Sometimes Janie turns them up, but obviously I've circulated the memorandum that you all.
Hold on, give us 1 second. We're
Okay.
having a very hard time hearing anything. It could just be the house speakers. Do a audio test to see what it sounds like.
Muscle in my shoulders.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm hurting.
Hey, how are you doing?
Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
All right, that's a little better.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Again, Jeremy Carroll, the city attorney. I have obviously circulated the memorandum I drafted. And I know one council member in particular, one planning commission member in particular had a question, and I did speak with Pat yesterday, and we talked about the questions he had. I'm happy to report on that conversation to you. But in general, I have taken a look under the Conflicts of Interest Act, the issue of the Washington and Lee site plan application that is pending before the Planning Commission. Because of the nature of the site plan application in the zoning process, it is not a use determination. Instead, it is, in my assessment, a ministerial review of whether or not the proposal meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance. I find that it does create a conflict for those individuals on the Planning Commission who have a personal interest in Washington and Lee or the subject property. And a personal interest arises by virtue of either being employed at Washington and Lee or having a spouse who's employed at Washington and Lee. As I state in the memo, not all conflicts require recusal. In this circumstance, however, because of the nature of the site plan application and the pending transaction before this body, whether to approve that site plan application, it had the vote that you eventually will take will only have application, or solely, as the code section reads, solely have application to Washington and Lee and that property that is owned by Washington and Lee. And that is the rationale. I believe there's a conflict of interest that requires recusal by those individuals who have that personal interest. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about that analysis. As I state at the end of that analysis, Conflict of Interest Act issues are thorny issues, and lawyers can go round and round arguing about whether a conflict exists or doesn't exist. And I'm happy to take the issue to the Commonwealth's attorney if anyone takes issue with my analysis. And with that, I'll yield the floor and see if anybody has any questions. Oh, as far as my conversation with Pat, he expressed a concern about some element of my report or my opinion, which indicated that with regard to a use determination, such as the master plan, because I think there, again, I'm not want to deal in hypotheticals. We'll address each instance as it arises. But when you're dealing with a use determination, it is much more likely than a site plan determination to have an impact on neighboring parcels or adjoining parcels. So that type of action may not have application solely to the applicant and the applicant's property. So with regard to a use determination, there's a much greater opportunity that I or the Commonwealth's attorney would view it as not being a conflict that required disqualification. And that's what Mr. Bradley was asking about, and he and I discussed. It wasn't specifically as to the site plan that's before you this evening.
Any questions for Jeremy?
Just a comment, Jeremy. It's John Driscoll.
Yes, sir.
When I first read this conflict of interest issue, when we were reviewing the master plan for WNL, my sense was I was trying to distinguish between a particular property and the master plan as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you're trying to do here. I'm not quite sure if the I'm trying to understand the master plan in itself does affect a larger community, but in effect, I'm thinking about it more recently, it doesn't affect any of us in Lexington unless we're speaking of an adjacent property. So if we're speaking of something, let's say on Lee Street, where a WNL proposal within the master plan begins to encroach on or abut or is adjacent to an existing uses, then that does. I'm just trying to.
It potentially has an impact on that neighboring parcel, and indeed the code obviously requires that they be given notice. They have an opportunity to come and speak on the issue. And case law recognizes that they could be an aggrieved party who would have a right to challenge the zoning action in court. That makes it more likely for a use determination, such as the master plan, to affect somebody else, and therefore, like I said, not have application solely to the neighbor. Where today what we're dealing with is the site plan. That is about whether the site plan complies with the ordinance. That to me does not have impact on the neighboring parcel, since the use has already been approved. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Mr. Driscoll, but trying to.
Yeah, no, and I didn't pose it very well because I'm still trying to figure it out.
Sure.
The issue.
And that goes to my point about these being thorny issues. And obviously, I wasn't the attorney who expressed any opinion on the master plan. I've taken a look at it briefly for the purposes of this motion, but I'm not trying to go back and rehash that issue. I just wanted to note in this opinion that just because you have to recuse yourself from the site plan determination does not mean that you necessarily will have to recuse yourself from all zoning determinations or issues that come before the planning commission. Like I said, it's something we'll want to revisit as these issues come up.
I would recommend to my fellow commissioners and to yourself and Arnie that maybe you would go to the Commonwealth attorney on this. I think it's going to keep coming up. It's not going to go away. We're always going to have WNL. I'm pretty sure we'll always have WNL commissioners and then WNL approvals. So I think more clarity on it in the future would be helpful, or at every time that there is a particular approval process before us, we ask for your opinion.
I think the second is what Jeremy's recommending, and that's
Okay.
what makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other items we want to discuss with Jeremy while he's still present?
Of those two options, which one makes sense to any of the other commissioners, if I may ask?
I would not be opposed to him speaking with the Commonwealth attorney, but it's not my decision. I don't have it.
My suggestion would be, if I'm going to speak with the Commonwealth's attorney, it not be about the site plan issue that's before you this evening. I mean, I think I'm very comfortable with the determination there. I don't know that I'm getting any pushback on that. I think the issue where you might want some additional guidance from the Commonwealth's attorney would be on the use issues when you're talking about the master plan type issue or conditional use permit or rezoning. I'm happy to reach out and have that conversation. Well, let me say that. I'm happy to reach out and have that conversation, assuming City Council wants me to.
I'll defer to City Council's ultimate decision on how on that. I guess my time on Planning Commission is drawing to an end, and so I don't have as much stake in this game. But when we were discussing the master plan months ago, the opinion of a different attorney was completely different. So I understand that the uses are different between a master plan and a site plan, but I guess
It actually wasn't different, though. I don't understand why you're saying it's different. He said we could participate on the master plan. There became issues on the CUP. His reasoning was actually the exact same as what Jeremy's saying.
Okay. I guess the way, at the time, the definition of like personal interest was, I felt different back then.
Wasn't there a state law that came in between that said that we had to change our guidelines that maybe made it more?
I think we chose to be more in
Yeah,
alignment
then,
with law as
right.
opposed to something changing.
Okay.
The local guidelines exceeded what the Conflicts of Interest Act permitted, I think would be the way to view it.
And we didn't have that latitude to make it broader, is what we found out.
Okay.
And I will tell you, and I mentioned this to Arnie, I don't know that I put it in the memo. I did reach out to the Conflict of Interest Act Advisory Council in Richmond. They provide feedback, just like there's a Freedom of Information Act Advisory Council, and they wholeheartedly agreed with the assessment on the site plan analysis. And I can also touch base with them on the use issues as they come up as well if I need to.
Okay, this is John again. Leslie may have a different opinion. I would feel that would be helpful to give guidance in the future.
And I've
All
provided, I provided Arnie, and I think I saw it in the packet, kind of the disclosure forms for, and I apologize, I don't know all the members of the Planning Commission. I know Leslie, of course, and I know she would be one who would be recusing, but I'm not sure who the others would be. I guess Mr. Bradley's not there. But those are the forms to be used.
Yeah, we received those forms, so.
Okay. All righty.
Okay, any last questions before we let Jeremy go? Thank you for your time, Jeremy. Appreciate you coming, visiting with us. And
Thank you very much. And I appreciate y'all accommodating my schedule and moving me up on the agenda very much. Have a good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
okay, there we have it. So we are going to jump back into the regular sort of modified agenda and go to item 3, which is the approval of the minutes from June 8th.
I just want to note that I was on time today. 5:04, that was an aberration.
I
Thank
move
you.
to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you.
Second,
Any further discussion? All in favor?
I
I sorry, I just noticed arrived at 5:04. Just got called out. Wow. Okay, let's move on to citizens' comments on matters not on the agenda. Okay, given enough time there, I do not see anybody coming up to speak. So we'll close citizens' comments on matters not on the agenda, and we'll move back into new business. And we're going to jump to item D, which is ECCOA 2023-03, an application by Hugh Latimer for approval of a certificate of appropriateness for construction of the Williams School expansion building at 216 West Washington Street, tax map 16-1-1, owned by Washington and Lee University. Do we open all of these together, or are we doing them one by one?
You can open both of those together if you like, and we can hold the public comments and the discussions together, or you could hold them separately. It's up to you how you'd like to handle that.
Is now the time that I should go ahead and recuse?
Yeah, we need to
So,
recuse
yeah.
ourselves.
So, in accordance with Virginia code, I have personal interests in City of Lexington, a personal interest in the City of Lexington Planning Commission's consideration of WNL's site plan application for the Williams School that disqualifies me as from participating in the discussion of the transaction. So it relates to the fact that I am a faculty member at WNL. And so I'm going to now step off the dais and go join the people.
My husband is employed with Washington Lee, so I too am going to recuse myself.
All right, and I am also employed by Washington and Lee University, so I will recuse myself as well. I just wanted to have the order of business of opening the two items together, but I guess that's okay. So you all can figure that out.
Yeah.
you want me to chair?
Would you mind?
Uh-oh. Okay, let me follow up with Blake's question. Arnie, would you recommend that we open them together or separately?
I would probably separate in this case.
Okay. All right, well, would you like to give us a staff report on the application for approval of the certificate of appropriateness for construction of the Williams School expansion building?
Sure. For the property at 216 West Washington Street, which is in the R1 zoning district and also in the institutional overlay zoning district, Washington Lee is requesting a entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness, which on the face of it makes absolutely no sense, except for the fact that For anything in the institutional overlay, we have the criteria in section 7 of our zoning ordinance, or Article 7. It talks about site plans that are needed for new construction. And then it also has in section 7.9, design review required. So it says design review is required for all facilities in accordance with the requirements of Article 6 of this chapter. And Article 6 happens to be your entrance corridor. And that's where we find those design criteria for landscaping and buildings and whatnot. My presumption there is they didn't want to develop new design criteria just for the institutional district. So they just grabbed what they had in the entrance corridor. So WNL is not anywhere close to the entrance corridor, but we're using the design standards in the entrance corridor. So therefore, you are, prior to the site plan, being asked to review the criteria for sort of design review items. A little bit of background in this overview of requests in the first part of your staff report. Through the master plan process, there was a specific height of 54 feet allowed for this particular building. You may recall that in that part of the request and approval. You see a location map on the bottom of the page of the staff report that sort of has Baker and Davis outlined. That's not a separate parcel. That's just roughly the limits of this particular request. You see a picture on the next page of the Baker and Davis halls. And then on the bottom of that page, a drawing an elevation for the proposed building. And again, or maybe not again so much as the first time, the request is to remove Baker and Davis and to replace that with a Williams School expansion building. So a brand new building for the Williams School for expansion. They will still have whole camp in the other building. So those will get renovated later on. So this is an expansion of that entire school. And this will not be the substitute for the entire school, but this will be a new building for them. Flipping over to the next page, if you don't mind, I covered a little bit of the entrance corridor. So in the entrance corridor, we're worried about sort of the scenic and historic and architectural and cultural resources. And and please interrupt me if you have any questions. But the important part of all this is on that next page, which is 3 of 5 of your staff report, where we started getting into the specific criteria. I'm not going to read them all, but just to start with the landscaping, and please interrupt if you have any questions. You're being asked to review the many pages of site plan material that you received, and we gave you some 11 by 17s to make it a little bit easier. And we also have a full-size copy if that helps you at all. So in the landscaping, as an example, the first criteria in A1, landscaping shall be used to soften the visual impact of development and enhance the appearance of the area. So what? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a question. And that's about street trees. Is that where street trees fall in? And yeah, tell me about street trees.
Oh, well, we don't have, if you're asking if we have a specific requirement for street trees, the answer is no.
Right.
So then if you would like to have, and I'm not sure if this is what you're asking, but if you would like to have more landscaping or more street trees in particular, how would you sort of balance that request according to the criteria that we have here? Because ultimately what we're asking you to do is use these criteria for and balance that against what has been proposed. And I may have lost it already. We do have a landscaping plan.
Yeah. Somewhere, one of these.
Oh, yeah. We have it on the larger page. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
I think you probably did. It is something that I would like to hear from the folks from Washington Lee about.
Yeah, maybe I'll say it in a slightly different way. In our requirements for screening and our requirements for buffering, we don't have anything specifically that says a street tree shall be planted 40 feet on center along major streets.
Right. So it's really just a request. It would be a request from the Planning Commission or a recommendation.
I have to be a little bit
or is
careful
there,
because as an example, your recommendation should be based on the criteria that we have. So
Okay.
if it would be nice to have, you could make a recommendation for approval as proposed and say it would also be nice if you could consider to put in extra street trees.
okay,
I would not include that in your recommendation because it's not a criteria or a standard that we currently have in our zoning ordinance.
right. So I guess my question might be around, since this language is very subject to interpretation,
Agreed.
shall be used to soften the visual impact of, landscaping shall be sufficient to soften the visual effects of parking lots, et cetera. Let's see. Landscape buffers shall be of sufficient size to permit street trees and plantings. And shall be compatible with landscaping, adjacent landscaping. So I guess the question then is, since this is completely subjective, how does that sort of, what the proposal is quite big. This drawing is it shows quite a substantial building and very small trees, so that I would say probably don't go very far towards softening.
Okay.
So that's the question, I guess, is,
And I forgot where we were. We're not at the site plan portion yet, where if it meets it, and you do have discretion here. So I have to take back what I said a minute ago.
Okay.
You do have discretion in this case because we're still at the portion where we're talking about the interest corridor. You do have some open-ended sort of criteria here. So you do have discretion for making your recommendation with adding 2 street trees of a certain caliber or whatever, however you want to make that recommendation.
Okay.
So I have to retract what I said earlier. So
Okay.
you do have some discretion here with your recommendation.
okay. Thank you.
Anything else on landscaping? And again, we do have the full size set if it helps at all to open up the full size set of plans to more easily see the detail.
Thank you.
Signage, there's actually not a whole lot of signage that's being proposed. A lot of it's more for sort of wayfinding, and also some of it's no parking in the fire lane type signage that will be more marked on the pavement itself. And we also told you which, at least gave you the reference to which sheet it's on, because there are a number of sheets that were provided by the applicant. Now, architecture here, we talked about materials and colors and the screening of mechanical units. And flipping over to the next page, also screening of loading docks and trash containers, which they have provided a fencing or fence type screening for the trash containers, and also for the backup generator that are on the back side of the building and along Early Fielding Way. So that would meet those requirements. So here, there is going to be some discretion. So the first one, materials, colors, and general style of the building, you can certainly have some interpretation there as an example. And that's all I'll say for that section, unless there are any questions. Site planning, this isn't your typical development in the sense that they're not putting in parking lots. There was already a building there. There's actually not that much that's changing as far as site planning goes. As an example, the first one talks about parking lot layout shall respond to the topographic characteristics. Well, there isn't a parking lot being proposed. 2 buildings are coming down, and they had a lot of access through pedestrian ways, but not from a parking lot, as an example, and that's not changing. And number 2, the number of access points to the parking lots from a street. Again, we're talking about parking lots, which are not an issue in this particular case. Number 3, also parking lots. And then number 4 talks about interconnected parking lots and landscaped islands, and central parking lots shall be encouraged. Again, parking, a lot of parking here, as you see in the site planning. Number 5 as well. And then finally, number 6, pedestrian access from the sidewalk into individual project sites, as well as within sites and between sites, shall be provided. Well, that's exactly what they're doing. The students need to get across West Washington Street Previously, they had a dorm here or dorms here. They've had some transitional uses since then, but the primary focus is pedestrian. If there's nothing there, then lighting, they will utilize their typical light fixture. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but they do have a note that was added to their landscaping and lighting plan that said that they will all be dark sky compatible, which is a somewhat newer requirement for us.
And how does the dark sky I know that this is not an issue in this case, but how this says minimize the amount of light that is directed to the sky. How does which one takes precedence? The dark sky?
The more restrictive one, which came
Okay.
in after, and it's a good point that we should probably at some point go back and modify number E2 to reflect the dark sky
Definitely.
requirement. And then I'll read that last paragraph. In making the determination, Planning Commission may consider any architectural feature which influences appearance, such as but not limited to the motif and style, color, texture, and materials, configuration, orientation, mass, shape, height, and location of buildings, location, configuration of parking lots, landscaping, and buffering. And that's all I have for a presentation. We do have a suggested motion for you at the end of the packet there.
Arnie,
Happy
could
answering
you-
further questions?
Well, not a question, but just for the sake of everyone here, could you go over your recommendations?
I'll just read them if that's all right.
Yep.
In staff's opinion, the proposed Williams School expansion building meets all the design standards included in the entrance corridor overlay district. As was pointed out, there is some discretion in those. And interpretation, the proposed landscaping is consistent with the remainder of the WNL campus. The proposed signage is minimal and primarily intended to provide directions. The architectural details are generally consistent with the other buildings on the WNL campus. The proposed building is set back from West Washington Street and in the same overall location of the existing Baker and Davis halls that will be demolished. The lighting is also consistent with existing lighting fixtures on the WNL campus, and new fixtures will meet dark sky requirements.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from Commission
Point out
members?
one other thing that I've
Yeah.
neglected to do on page 19, along with the application, there was also a description of exterior materials that are being offered by the applicant that will be utilized for the building, if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Now we're ready for the applicant statement. Welcome, Hugh.
Latimer from Washington, Lee, Roanoke, Virginia. The question I did hear about landscaping. Earlier in our design,
Sorry, can you tell me which map you're looking
sure,
at?
it's drawing L 3.01. That's our landscaping plan.
And do we have,
Yes, you have that
okay.
on your.
Arnie, is that in the
11 by
beginning?
17.
Yeah, I don't think
Sorry, L,
L 3.01.
Oh, we
I got it.
Okay.
L 3 points. There it is. It's right at the beginning. Go back.
Okay, okay.
And we're planting 19 trees on the site, so it's not enough for not doing much. But along Washington Street, I would point. Yes.
Okay, Hugh.
Can I approach to point something to you all on your map?
as long as we catch everything on the recording.
And this is the drive aisle between our new building and Evans Hall, which is, the driveway is mandated by the fire department, and that's how they get a fire truck back here. So originally we had more trees planted along Washington Street, but we had to maintain that clear distance for them in that regard. So we had to take one tree away from that respect.
And so these
Those are maples, and those will get turned into significantly sized trees as they grow over time. Their initial planting, they're probably going to have a spread of about 10 feet.
This is 10 feet.
No, that's shown as full
This-
growth.
Oh, I see.
That's shown as full
got it.
growth. Yeah.
And this is extent.
These ones that are very light are
Very
existing
good.
trees that
Great.
will remain for us. And then we have other trees planted all around the back, including around the outdoor classroom.
So
And you are not seeing as many trees on that drawing. You are not. You are not.
great. Thank you.
Any other questions about?
Not about that.
Oh, that's it, Hugh? You're happy with,
I'll answer any other questions.
yeah. Okay. All right, thank you. Sorry, yeah. At this point, we'd like to open up to public comment. Please come forward if you'd like to make public comment. And do we have anybody? Going once, twice? I don't see anybody jumping up in their seat. All right, we'll close the public comment period and move to commission discussion and decision.
John, when do we talk about?
The traffic impact study.
Yeah, does that come out with the
If you have questions, ask now.
site plan? When do we talk about the
Oh, yeah.
Traffic impact
Traffic,
study.
yeah, that would be later.
later? That's what I thought. Okay.
This is more about sort of the look and
Right.
how it,
Okay,
and not so much about the specific items with the traffic
Right.
study.
Arnie, did you receive any public comments that we should be aware of written?
No written comments. I thought somebody might show up and have some comments about sort of the design of the building, but that did not occur. So nothing specific.
So I have a question. So on page 22 of our packet, page 2 of 5 of the it's under there are 2 numbered items. In the first one, it says that the uses and layout of the subject property shall be in substantial compliance with the campus master plan. And I was just wondering about why that's not in full compliance and how it's not in compliance.
There's a little bit of latitude because when we're at the campus master plan setting and they say it's roughly going to be located on the back part of this property. And let's say they ran into rock or something, they had to shift it
Sure.
an insubstantial amount to get around, then it just provides for that leeway.
Okay. I'm just going through page by page.
please.
Is that
Okay.
okay?
Yep.
So on the next page, I just a quick question. So the 54 feet, is that to the top of the roof? Okay.
Mhm. If I can make one comment
Yeah.
there, just for everybody's interest, I guess, is that there was a initial request and we went through 3 iterations. So they submitted a site plan, I think in February, if I remember correctly. We reviewed, had comments, they made changes. So we've seen 3 versions of this, and this is the final one, just to give you an idea of sort of the amount of time that we've spent with this.
Mhm.
And one other thing, and there was with the height, there were also solar panels in the first rendition, and those have been removed. And the reason I bring that up, once they figure out which solar panels and how much additional height, you may see a request for solar panels and additional height in the future.
Okay,
But
good
that's
to know.
just to give you a sort of an overview of the process to get it to where it meets height requirements in the master plan and also the other requirements that we have for zoning, for fire, for building, and for public works.
Thank you. Okay, so next question is, so under landscape buffering, the same page 23, it requires a prescribed landscape buffer, where it abuts as residential zoning district. I'm just wondering whether that also includes the dorms that are both across from and sort of kitty corner to this.
We don't typically require you to buffer the uses that are on your own property.
Okay.
So therefore, there wouldn't have been the requirement for them to, but if that's the question, I think that's the question.
Yeah, that is the question.
Okay.
I noted sorry, I did not, in my notes, I did not note which drawing it was on, but the generator looks like it's very close to Gaines Residence Hall. And I was just wondering how far it is away and whether that's something that needs to be considered, because I know that a generator for a building this size might be quite noisy.
It's a backup generator and there's already one there. So it's the second one that's going in, and I don't know the distance without having a scale.
Roughly, are we talking 5 feet?
It's across the parking lot, so we're at least 40 some feet.
Okay. I couldn't quite tell from it looked closer, but I was looking at these tiny little maps.
Yeah,
So
it's difficult.
I'm pretty sure it's about 50 feet away from
Okay.
Gaines.
thank you. My next question is on the utility plan C6. Is that something that we need to wait on, or like the traffic study, or is that
Well,
something
it
we talk
depends on
about now?
what the question about the utility.
So right. So it shows a storm pipe, but it doesn't, I couldn't quite tell where the storm pipe, where the outflow was. And so I was just wondering if you could speak to that.
They have certainly developed their system so it works, but I would sort of try to sure if I jumped to site plan. I'm already in the wrong section. Because that storm inlet is not something that's so visual. So as far as, the color of the inlet or the size of the inlet or how it functions, how would that be one of the criteria, I guess? How do we measure that against one of our criteria?
Right. And that's why I was saying that this might not be the right time to ask about this. I'm actually just thinking about stormwater
Drainage.
and how you
Where it
address,
goes,
I'm sorry.
where it goes.
Yes, where it goes and how it's handled on site, and whether you're getting problematic areas.
It is a little bit more for the site plan, but since it's asked now, I'll just quickly cover. If I'm not mistaken, there's a little bit of an in-ground storage, but ultimately it's going to have to be designed and go to the DEQ to meet all the state requirements for stormwater.
Okay.
And then ultimately, once it's held and filtered and cleaned a little bit, it is going to make its way into the rest of the stormwater system, which makes its way out into our rivers.
Yeah.
Basically answer your question. If you look at the opposite end of the building from where I showed the fire lane,
Yeah.
you'll see a bunch of rectangles, if you will.
Yes.
Those are underground retention items.
Thank you.
Good question, good answer.
Yeah. And then I guess my other sort of more my other concern is about the glass front of this building. The center part. The sides are definitely, reminiscent of other buildings on campus. But that center building with just floor to ceiling glass is, it doesn't seem to me to have a relationship to the rest of the buildings in that area. And so I guess one question would be, are we just considering how this building relates to other Washington and Lee buildings, or are we also concerned with how it is relating to the rest of downtown?
Well, if we take the first item, C1, and I'm now on page 14, towards the bottom, materials, colors, and general style of buildings within a development should be coordinated. So
Mhm.
that gives us an idea that it should be within WNL more so than perhaps the entire community.
Mhm. Although number 5 there says architectural styles,
True.
building and roofing materials and colors shall be reflective of the traditional architecture of Lexington.
Perhaps it'd be a good time to ask maybe the applicant why there's so much glass, to see what the reasoning behind that is.
Sure. Could you speak to that, Mr. Latimer?
Absolutely. There was interest by the university to have an expression of this new building to be a little bit more contemporary
Mhm.
and maybe not do an early 20th century classical revival building. And I would say that at the CGL building down at the end of the
I'm not sure what that
um
is.
what used to be called the DuPont building.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, where we did
Thank
an
you.
addition on it.
Okay.
Once again, we put in sort of a glass atrium on the side,
Mhm.
and certainly the main entry into Elrod Commons has that multi-story glass atrium. We're picking up, so there is precedent, if you will.
Yeah.
On campus for that.
Right.
And
Okay.
and certainly I think that we provided a more contemporary expression of our traditional neoclassical without really going too far, if you will, away from it. So it's a little bit of a compromise between the two styles.
Right. I know that you're probably trying to get away from pediments, but is that something that you considered, or?
Oh yeah, we had 3 pediments on an earlier design. And again, there was a desire on the university's part to not be quite so literal with our earlier styles.
Right. And I like the DuPont, the former DuPont building. I like the way that looks, but I would note that that's interior to campus. And this is on a street on Washington Street and much more closely, I mean, just distance wise, much closer to downtown Lexington, historic Lexington. And I guess I'm concerned that this is, this is right next to Evans, which I assume is eventually also going to, get a facelift or a do-over. And so I sense that if this becomes what is common in that area, then that could be extended to Evans and could be extended beyond. So I don't know. Do either of you have thoughts about this?
I would say one thing, that our renovations and changes to Evans are not planned to drastically change the exterior.
I'm sorry,
The changes, when we do renovate Evans,
Mhm.
we do not have plans for doing significant changes to the exterior.
okay. But that could, I mean, things change down the road. So buildings eventually do get renovated often. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not.
We will
Right, right.
renovate it, but we're not going to change it
Sure.
from the exterior.
So do either of you have concerns about?
I don't. You, John?
I don't either.
You don't either.
No. But I'm always loath to comment on design issues. I don't really have a problem with the increased glass. I think kind of, it helps to invite you as the public into the building and seeing inside. So, and in terms of its location, I'd say it's far enough from the center of town to be seen as a building within the campus. And so I'm okay with it as that.
And you feel the same?
I don't think it's a extremely busy thoroughfare through Lexington. I think it's not used that much by residents.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as a building on its own, it's does not trouble me in that way. My concern is really just about the proximity and maintaining a Lexington feel. But you know, again, landscaping is going to soften it.
That's,
will help.
yeah, that's what I was going to add. Yes, your tree question
Yeah.
will be helpful.
Yep, exactly. I mean, this drawing that we're looking at and that you have in front of you, I think, shows pretty small trees, not big maples. So I do think that that'll help.
Another
So,
thing this drawing doesn't really help in terms of portraying is that the building is fairly set back from Washington.
Yeah.
Particularly in regards to Evans.
Mhm.
Doesn't quite show.
thank you.
All
Those-
good questions. Thank you, Shannon.
Yep.
Any other questions,
not on
discussion
this-
among us? Then
So we're talking about the traffic study
the next time.
in the next, okay,
Yeah.
yep.
All right, so shall we move for a decision on this one and then move on to the next?
Sure.
Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness application EC 2023-03 for the construction of the new Williams School expansion building at 216 West Washington Street as proposed by the applicant.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's so quiet up here. Just the three.
Well, thank you for taking us systematically through some good questions.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for patiently waiting through that one. If you're not here for WNL, you have one more to be patient for.
Right.
So we're going to move on to item E, an application requesting approval of a site plan for the construction of the Williams School expansion at 216 West Washington Street. Arnie, staff report.
For the same property and for the same project, we do have a request for an expansion building. And we're now at the site plan stage. So at site plans, it's really a ministerial act in the sense that if it meets the requirements, it should be approved, unless of course there's some mitigating circumstance. It is a building that's proposed to be 39,000 square feet plus or minus. And it's a new facility just west of Washington Street, and it's going to provide additional faculty offices and classrooms for the Williams School. You see, again, the same footprint and some of the same drawings as were provided to you in the entrance corridor. And getting the zoning authority. And then here on the top of page 23, the campus master plan statement proffered that includes a new Williams School building to be located on this side of the street and the underlying zone district. And we're going in expected to be 54 feet in height. And that is where they ended up. And perhaps more importantly now, traffic study, because that has come up at least in quickly. Traffic study, I didn't quite know how to handle. Honestly, it was something that was sort of requested or suggested. WNL proffered having updates to the traffic impact analysis for, I believe it was 4 buildings, if I remember correctly, this being the first one. But this isn't so much a standard. In other words, it's background or additional information for you. I would not utilize anything in the traffic study necessarily to make a recommendation against, because it's not truly a standard that we have for development of the building or the site. But it is something that we have. It was something that was proffered again during the campus master plan portion. So we do have it. I encourage you to ask questions about it, but I would not recommend that you use anything necessarily in the traffic study to make a motion or a recommendation against the proposal. I'm not going to go through all of, go
Okay,
ahead.
sorry. Oh, sorry. Go
If you,
ahead.
if you're ready to
No, I thought
ask
you-
questions now,
I
go right
thought you were
ahead.
done. Go ahead.
Now's a good time if you want to ask about traffic.
Did you have questions, Gladys?
I did on the, I have a question on construction traffic. If I read this correctly,
What page are you on?
Yeah,
oh, I'm
you get
sorry.
that.
46.
Okay.
Um, I believe it stipulates that the construction traffic will exit north on US 60, not passing through downtown Lexington, and will go out Route 60 that intersects with 64 for all their construction vehicles, which I think is a wonderful idea. I'd just like to know how come, if we should see, if this, how do we know that this is going to happen? And if we should see vehicles using our city streets and Main Street and so forth, what can be done about that?
Yes, I want to state that we want to be good neighbors. You know, I mean, I guess we ask for a little faith that we're going to do the right thing and that we're proposing to come in off of.
I think you will,
60.
but it's possible that the construction firm could.
Oh, we have
a
control.
little-
We have a lot of control over that.
Okay.
Within the contracts that we sign with them, we require certain things. In terms of behavior and what they do. And we have measures to penalize them if they don't comply. So we have a lot of authority to make that happen.
Okay.
And will you put up signage to sort of facing the direction saying no construction traffic this direction?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Did you have any other questions about?
No, that was my main concern that
I had lots of questions about the traffic study, but I don't think that I'm going to go into them because of what you said. But some of the concerns that you just might want to note for any future traffic studies, I was concerned that you had left out the 3 to 6 p.m. Time frame on a lot of these charts, which seems like it would be a pretty heavy usage for both traffic, cars, and pedestrians. And then also that, and hopefully, knock on wood, we won't have to go back here, but I noted that the traffic study was performed on October 7th of 2020. And I did a quick Google search and saw that WNL was in fact in session. However, a lot of, according to something written by some students, there were a lot of students who were quarantined. There were a lot of classes that were conducted only on Zoom. And then, of course, I would say there was nothing normal about that period of time for many, many people. So I guess I would be reluctant to rely on these particular numbers because of when the study was done. And then I did have a question. So I don't really need any answers or responses to that. I just wanted to make note of that. I was wondering, I'm familiar with another college that had a particularly high volume, and I suspect that this is at some periods during the day and days of the week, it will have some high volume traffic. I don't know that there's that much car traffic, but I guess, I don't know. There at this college where there was a lot of traffic, both pedestrian and car, they ended up putting a crosswalk that the pedestrians could control. And so it was just a flashing light, and it was a slightly raised, or, there was probably an indentation in the street, a bump out. And I just wanted to point out that I assume that that's something that we could do if there was a problem. Is that something like that?
I guess the only way that I will answer that is there were 5 recommendations.
Yep.
And those recommendations, WNL is picking up, except for one, because it's already been done, because one of the crosswalks has already been taken out. So they've committed to doing 4 of those 5. Again, one of them has already been completed.
Mhm.
But that particular crosswalk where you push the buttons and the lights happen, that was not part of the traffic impact analysis.
Right.
But if it becomes a bigger issue, can that be considered? Certainly.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's all I had. I just, because the numbers seemed like they might be a little underrepresentative because of the pandemic. It just seemed like we might need to revisit at some point. Hopefully not, but.
Okay. I had a question, but it's more, on table 1 on page 45, and I agree with Shannon's point that I was looking for the PM times after 3. I was curious why, just trying to understand, and more for the future, if it ever comes up, why is there such a difference between the northbound and the southbound traffic? I'm just trying to, if you can think about it, Arnie, in terms of the flows, or our traffic consultant could help us understand that.
West.
On table 1 on page 45, you can think about that when you come up for public comment. For applicant statement. And then my other question, Arnie, is on the recommendations. Is that part of, just to clarify, the recommendations that you just referenced, are they part of our site plan approval or not?
You could modify the suggested motion to make
Include
sure
them?
that those are included, but
Okay.
I believe that because they responded in the positive that they would be done, that they're pretty much already included.
Okay.
And if I could just take a second while you're formulating your next questions, just to focus you on the criteria on the bottom of page 24. 4 site plans shall be approved if it's found to be adequate with respect to, number 1, I'm going to go through these with some detail. Locations and design of vehicular entrances and exits in relation to streets, giving access to the site and in relation to pedestrian traffic. Number 2, locations and adequacy of automobile parking areas, not an issue here. Number 3, adequate provision for traffic circulation and control within the site and provision for access to adjoining property. Again, not a big issue here. Number 4 on the next page, compliance with the requirements for setback and screening, which they do meet. Number 5, adequacy for drainage, water supply, fire protection, and sanitary sewer facilities. We would not really have brought this to you if they couldn't meet all those items. Number 6, compliance with applicable established design criteria, construction standards, and specifications for all improvements. Design criteria we took care of for the most part in the entrance corridor. Certificate of appropriateness that was already recommended for approval. Number 7, approval by the city health officer and its agents for septic tank. We don't have to worry about that item. And the last one, number 8, adequacy of proposed landscaping for softening harsh visual effects and so on. We've already discussed that to some degree. So if I could just focus you on those criteria for the consideration of the site plan.
Yep. Thank you for taking us back to those. And I dropped my question on the table on the traffic study. No need to answer it now. It's for the future.
I do have a question about the northbound, southbound. Isn't Washington a east-west?
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, that's why I'm confused. That's why I'm asking. But, well, it's,
I'm sorry.
If you don't-
So which way is northbound then?
Northbound would be like being at Lee Avenue and driving up toward the indoor athletic facility up of the hill.
Okay,
Driving
so
up the
west,
hill.
Up
is-
the hill.
is
That's
what we're
west.
calling it.
Okay,
and then southbound would be the east.
that makes
Towards
more
the east.
sense.
Yes, it
Then that
does.
makes the numbers, the logic to the numbers. Okay, do we have any more discussion on this?
Mm-mm.
Normally, this is largely a ministerial function, but it has a little more weight because of the scale, since we're dealing with it today. If we have no more, well, Arnie, for the record, can you read your staff conclusions and recommendations?
Staff's opinion that the proposed site plan for Williams School expansion building complies with all zoning requirements pertaining to the site design and use, and is in compliance with the other city codes related to drainage, water supply, fire protection, sanitary sewer facilities, and the construction standards. And have we asked for a public comment on
Not
this
yet.
section?
Sorry,
Okay.
we jumped. Do we have a public? So I'd like to open the public comment section. Going once, going twice. Any commission members out there? No, you can't say anything. All right, we'll close the public comment. Thank you, Arnie. So. And we've had a discussion. Shall we move
You want to
to
move?
a suggested motion?
All right, I move to approve site plan number SP 2023-03 and find the submitted site plan for the Williams School expansion building at 216 West Washington Street to be in compliance with applicable city codes.
Would you like to say?
Second. I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. And with that decision, we now close and invite our planning commission members back. And I will gladly hand the chair back to the chair.
What did I miss?
You
Thank
weren't
you all very
here.
much. Appreciate all the applicants for their time. And let's move on to item F, which is a PUD 2023-01 application by Max Marks Homes LLC and Weatherburn Holdings to amend the plan unit development for the Weatherburn subdivision located at the intersection of Thornhill Road and Chamberlain Loop.
Construction of the houses is complete now in Weatherburn, and they're requesting one last amendment because there is a lot that's really not buildable. Because there's already a retaining wall mostly on it, and it would be very difficult for them to go through the engineering and the actual construction costs of making that a buildable lot. So the request before you is to take that lot, divide it, add it to the other lot to the left and the lot on the right, and then move a little bit of the open space wedge that's sort of at the back side of the lots over a little bit, so that the open space doesn't increase or decrease by any amount. It's still the required amount of open space that was approved in the PUD. The reason you're having two items in front of you is that the plan unit development was always tied, the approval of that was always tied to being consistent with a concept plan. So when we go and amend that concept plan, the subdivision plan, then we have to go back also and address the consistency item in the PUD. So the first request for you is the planned unit development to change that to allow this adjustment where there's going to be one less buildable lot. The area from that lot gets divided between the lot to the left and to the right. And then again, the open space little wedge at the back part of these lots just shifts over a little bit.
Okay, so, but we still will tackle each one individually, even though they are, okay, still related, okay.
We could open both of these up
Yeah.
because these are very similar to each
Oh,
other
okay.
if you wanted to, or we could hold two separate public hearings.
How does G, sorry, can you explain though, G, what what's unique in G that we're not talking about in F? What are we considering?
G is actually the subdivision itself.
Okay.
Oh, in terms of the agenda.
So it's the same.
It makes sense
Really-
to open them up together, don't
You're,
you?
yeah, it's the same proposal in both. One's just because of the consistency and the reference in the PUD, but the substance is the same.
Okay. I suggest then we'll just open them both together. And we'll approve them individually, but we'll discuss them together.
Do we have to vote on that?
No, you just open, just like you did. There's no vote for opening.
Okay. Was that the staff report or is
That-
there more?
That was, but I want to, in the nice photograph that's on the second page, it gives you an idea of what's on the property. So in the middle of that, roughly where lot number 21 is shown there, you see the fall of the property and you also see the retaining wall that's holding up the side yard for that particular duplex that's on lot number 20. And again, it would be difficult to develop that, to move that retaining wall and create a space that would be adequate for the house. So it's the applicant, the owner of the lot, that's deciding that that's too difficult to do and would rather just sort of split that between the two properties, but one for lot 20 or part of it for lot 20 and part of it for lot 21. That's shown on page 73 also in Pearson's drawing there in the upper right. So we're in the upper right bend as you're going around the horseshoe. And then Kate also tried to perhaps improve that a little bit. So if we go all the way over to page 88, we try through a little bit of color where the yellow area is the lot that is to be vacated. And the two lots that are outlined in red, they grow a little bit in size. And then that wedge along the backside where it was shown in green here, it just shifts a little bit over.
So Arnie, that opening, that wedge is when it says the overall acreage for the open space parcel will remain the same acreage.
There is parcel, and I cannot remember the name of the number 39-1-6, which is an area on the outskirts of the subdivision or of the outskirts of the lots. So that open space lot will not change with this shifting of the wedge. So the overall acreage does not change for the open space.
The acreage for each new property who does
Well,
change.
Well, I wanted to
It
make
absorbs that.
sure was that the open space didn't get less because the people that were buying lots in Weatherburn had some expectation that the open space would be a certain acreage as was proposed. So if that was if the acreage was lowered, then we would be doing a lot more advertising and a lot more notification to all the property owners, where in this case, we only advertised or notified adjacent property notices to the people that were directly affected. So that would have been a bigger impact if there had been an adjustment, particularly downward in the open space calculation for acreage.
I have a question that I think is for you about open space and I read through the requirements, but I assume that the point of open space is to have access to it. Is that?
I would think so, but I wasn't here when this PUD was approved. And I'm not sure if Pearson can answer that question either. But yes, from what I understand, that should be accessible for all of the folks, and to maybe even sort of drive that point a little bit. What page am I on?
Because I'm in looking at it, it's not clear
not-
how people would access it other than going all the way out to Thornhill Road.
Well, backyards.
And
Yeah.
not the folks on the eastern side, though.
So the folks that are, oh, correct. Yeah.
And probably not the folks in the middle either.
They have that little bit of a wedge and it's going through the middle. And they also have that pavilion sort of thing that's more or less in the center of the development.
Mhm.
Maybe not always easily accessed through that middle of the block open space area.
Right.
But I'm having a little bit of hard time because I wasn't here when that PUD was developed and don't
Sure.
really know the intent. But we did, as an example, there's a 3-foot walking easement for when lots 17 and 18 were increased all the way back to the back property line, but they still specifically added a 3-foot easement. So people that were traversing through the back parts, at least of that portion of the subdivision, still had the ability to do so.
And is there an easement in this setup where you have this very nice big opening that seems like it would invite people walking through?
For what we're doing now, there's not an easement proposed. It's just lot 21 is being given. So there's no easement that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if that was ever considered.
There's a 10-foot easement that's always been there alongside of lot.
No, there you have it.
Right up against lot 22? I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm sorry, on 22 and 23.
Yeah.
So we don't see that one.
So it's right up here. Well, should he be? Yeah, his.
And page 85, you might be able to see that a little bit better.
I'm sorry.
Page 85.
Let's see.
So instead of where you were considering with this new open-ish area that's not going to be developed, it wouldn't be there, but it's only one lot over that there is already a 10-foot, did you say, Pearson?
10 foot.
Between lots 23 and 22, you see that little dashed line?
Mhm, I
That would
do.
Be the easement.
I'm just wondering if the developers considered, rather than changing everything around the way they have, just vacating number 21 and leaving that or adding that to the open space rather than smushing them together, because it's a nice big open pathway back to the back, which means that nobody has to, you could get rid of the easement between 23 and 22 and you would have a sort of the more welcoming open space that
Is that a question?
I
Has
guess
he
it is.
considered it? I doubt it. Because he's not here and I haven't asked him that, but the point of what he's trying to do is there's 3 lots there. They're trying to turn it 2 lots and make it bigger and more buildable, because when this wall was built, it encroaches on 21. They just, whoever built that thing just built it way over the line through the open space. We're trying to put it on all of lot 20. So all of the wall that supports that house is on their land and not on the other. But the 10-foot easement's always been there. If we were just to vacate 21 and bring it up, 22 would still be basically an unbuildable lot. You wouldn't be able to get a building in there that's consistent with the other units
Sorry.
that are in there.
21, you said?
Well, it's revised lot 22. It's kind of confusing if you're looking at.
I see.
Get the picture. On
So, but I
87.
thought that these buildings were all already built.
No, not
that one,
on,
not the one.
there's one left. There's one.
You're talking about 21 that's not, that's left, but the other buildings, sorry, you just said that you wanted to expand the footprint of lot 22 and lot 20 because so that you could expand the building footprint.
There's, I don't think there's a building on. Let's see, which number page is it on? We just wanted to see is the boundary line. Flat, which is the little picture. Okay. It's that, can you see it? The smaller. of the two.
The smallest one, which page are, oh yeah, yep, I got it.
It's the.
The one with the orange, yellow and green, yeah.
So, yeah, on 87, you can see the wall.
Yep.
The wall right there. And if you look on the boundary line adjustment plat, you can see the wall drawn on there.
Yeah, I see it.
So I think what we're trying to do here is to get. No, maybe you're wrong. I may be wrong. Maybe it's expanding left and right. I'm not real sure to tell you the truth. It's whether or not he's trying to get another lot on there. My understanding is that the 0.134 acre revised lot 22 that's shown on the little plat is where he's trying to put another building to make it a buildable lot.
Another building.
But that's already got a house on it in the picture.
It may be, yeah, it may be.
And it also states that it's fully built out and nothing more is going to be built.
Maybe.
And that's my statement, and hopefully that's correct.
But to answer your question, no, I don't think he has considered that. He certainly didn't ask me anything about it. He's just trying to distribute those acreages out, make those two lots bigger. Yeah, I assumed it was to build on 22, but I think 22 is built on.
Yeah, from the picture.
Yeah.
I guess it allows you to build, maybe you could build a deck or something like that. I don't know, but
I don't think you could build anything on lot 21.
I'm talking about if you do expand the lots for make 20 and 22 wider, then you now have a little bit more leeway if you did want to put an accessory dwelling unit. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Not yet.
Well, real quick though, would you please state your name and address just so we have it on record since you.
Here's the Hotchkiss and I'm Wide Gap Road out here.
Okay, thank you. All right. We just wanted to get that on the record since we jumped into applicant statement and questions because you were asked questions directly.
Arnie, I guess it's in the narrative, but did somebody talk to Catherine Hills to make sure she wanted the additional?
Because
Acreage.
she wasn't included on the application, I
Right.
did reach out to her, and I do have an email in the packet that says she's in favor of.
Okay, I thought I saw that somewhere, but
Where is 25 Chamberlain Loop on this? Is that just it says owner of 25 Chamberlain Loop.
That's
The numbers are
problem
not
with
a
the
lot, yeah.
street addresses and the
Okay.
lot
Lots are
numbers.
different,
do
yeah.
not
Oh, okay.
work.
they're close enough that it looks like they should be the
Yes,
same. Yeah.
That's what leads to a lot of confusion.
It's because they've moved the lots, added lots, subtracted lots so many times. If you look up there on Little Plat or either one of these, all those reference plats that are on there, those are all the times that they've moved and reconfigured and combined and uncombined lots and whether or not. 7 times. So it really confusing. Yes, the house numbers don't go.
Oh, I see. 20. So 25 is lot 20.
Right.
I see. Okay. I
Yeah, it's Castle Hill.
So what makes this plot was envisioned to be buildable when it was all laid out? And so plot 20 and 22 were built. If plot 20 and 21 were first built, we probably wouldn't have this problem, right? Because it was just, is this and that's a question for Arnie, is this something for a PUD? I guess we can go back and modify this. Basically, the amount of taxable, this one parcel that we're giving up as a plan, and from a planning commission standpoint, is this is a taxable parcel right now that is going to be absorbed. Most of it's going to be absorbed into these other two adjoining properties, but there will be some that's not absorbed and it's just going to be given. Now, I guess the city assumes it. Is that who owns that?
The homeowners association will take
Owns that.
over.
Okay.
At some point in the process, I think somewhere around 50% of the lots are sold, then the homeowners association transitions more from the builder's control more to the homeowners association. So the homeowners association will be
Okay.
in control of the maintenance of the open space and the road in some future time as well.
And who owns the lot then? Do the homeowners, is just the lot as it currently is right now?
The LLC.
The Max Mark Homes owns lot number 21.
Okay.
That's being proposed to be vacated and then split and then absorbed by the two lots on either side.
And is the open space, is the acreage that is in open space, is that taxed differently than the acreage that is residential?
I would have to presume so, but I don't know that answer. Absolutely.
Arnie and Pearson also, question, do you know the open space that's available behind the homes? Is it usable, accessible? Or dead and good for nature?
It's good for raising deer.
Yeah.
Okay,
You come through there in the morning, you'll see that, but it's accessible. You can get to it from the road, you can get to it from the back of the houses. There's a 10-foot easement to get to it. They might be able to put a pavilion in it like they did in the middle. I don't know if you've been in there.
Right,
Max
yeah.
built that thing in the middle, but you can't build residential stuff back there.
no, I'm going to Shannon's point earlier that, and it might be. I mean, when you look at the picture that we have on page 87, you almost say that should be a public easement to the back of that open space.
Yes, that's what it looks like to me.
And it's at mid-block, so it makes sense. You know, it's up there. And there was any way in the splitting of the hairs or the parcel lines that could happen, or a portion of it is available. The thing about the little wedge, and we're going through the efforts to not change the percentage of open spaces, it's really whoever mows it, it's just a funny space. It's one of those that in 10 years, when we're all not on the commission, someone will come back and ask for an amendment to the parcel.
Right. They'll want to take that little triangle out. Yeah, I mean, I think that it would, if those people fenced their yards on the lot lines, the proposed lot 22 and proposed lot 20, then you would end up with an unmowable space in that, in the little divot there
In the back.
in the back on your map between where the orange lines come together in a triangle. One of my concerns about the open space is access and equity and access, because the folks over on this eastern side of the development, I mean, I don't know whether is the easement marked? This 10-foot easement between two houses?
I'm sure it's not.
So, right, so it probably looks an awful lot like every other lot. And so just in terms of trying to open up, we've got this green infrastructure plan, and it may not, this may just be a recommendation to the developer as opposed to saying, no, we're not okay with this. But it just seems like a lost opportunity. If this happens.
That may be one way to handle it, because as proposed, it meets our criteria. But if you want to make the motion to have it approved because it meets the criteria, but add on, it would be nice if the developer, the owner of the property, could consider leaving it as open space or connection to the open space.
So this is more of a magisterial.
We're in the
Discussion right now.
we got two pieces to it. So the PD, not so much,
Okay.
but when we get to
Okay.
the subdivision portion, yes.
So,
Have you walked this area? Have any of you? Because it's not, I mean, I've been through the neighborhood quite a bit. I don't think it's really all that accessible. And those houses, I mean, you basically feel like you're walking in somebody's backyard. I don't know that we're calling it open space. I think it's more just green space.
You're
Other-
talking about the designated open space
Yeah,
behind these
yeah,
houses.
Right. It's more just green space. I mean, the true open space that is used by the community is that pavilion in the middle area.
Although the back area is much bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure that it's, I mean, just because it feels like it's other people's backyard, it is, everybody in there is paying homeowners association fees, I assume, to have, to care for that open space and to use that open space. I'm just saying that it seems like it should be
I'm just saying
accessible.
I don't think it's very usable open space.
Ah.
A lot of that area on both sides is pretty slow, and we're not hearing from any of the neighbors.
Right,
with
exactly.
This issue.
And this big chunk, Pearson, is that not mostly the stormwater retention area?
It's the water that drains down out of Birdfield. Down in there. There is a stormwater
Over here.
facility down at the bottom along 251.
I imagine over here, yeah.
So it might look like a big chunk of open space.
But
It
it's
might be
not really.
open, but it's being utilized for detention or retention or stormwater facility.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that arc on the right side of the big one. That's the right of way going into Birdfield, right there.
The arc.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's that. It's sort of that brushy area back in
Yeah.
there to the left as you go.
There's no access to this space anywhere from Thornhill. I mean, you couldn't drive a car back there. No. I mean, it's not really very usable.
you know, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah,
Is it
it's not.
accessible? Is it?
Right.
More importantly, is it usable? Yeah.
So, and sorry, is this it says wastewater easement, not stormwater easement. Is there,
That's sanitary sewer, the 15 feet.
Okay,
But
gotcha.
there's a BMP
okay,
right there, right at the bottom. Or before it drains and goes underneath the road.
Okay.
And the creek that goes down to the golf course.
Okay, I have one more question. It goes back to this. If we look at the very last page, where Pearson mentioned there's the 10-foot walking easement. So that does exist.
mhm,
That means that legally, if I wanted to walk back through there, I could.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that a public easement or is that for people that live within the development, not to split hairs?
Association.
No, I didn't mean me. I mean,
Okay.
assuming,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, if I'm a resident, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I don't mean me. I
Okay,
mean,
so an owner.
but it's
Okay.
unmarked and potentially unknown to other residents.
Well, I would presume that when people sign a
I
deed,
do hope.
they would
One would
have to
hope.
know what they're signing and know what's the open space in the area.
It's a pretty tight knit community. I mean, they have a lot of, I
Yeah.
think they know what's going on in their neighborhood.
So is there an issue with this little triangle, John? You were,
no, it's just gonna be one of those.
yeah, it's gonna
Ones.
be like, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
They weren't thinking about the landscapers.
Well, there's several of them in this.
Yeah, there are.
The triangle. Okay,
You look
Yeah.
at the big,
But yeah,
right.
look at the big guy,
So
I think the only issue to the city is what Matt was bringing up as far as when the development was proposed, we were supposed to have so many taxable
Right.
housing units and we're going to be losing one, but doesn't make for a better neighborhood.
Right. And I assume, like I was asking, the tax rate for these houses is, I assume, separate from the open space. So at least this is probably raise or keeping the tax rate a little bit higher than the open space tax rate. That would be my guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fair assumption.
So why was this drawn? If we were to move these lines, why are we not just taking up all the property that was originally slotted? So in other words, that's the reason you get this odd little triangle is because we don't want to expand through all of what was the
We're trying to not lose any open space.
That was my recommendation. When it first came in, I think it showed the lot 20. That was going to be, let me make sure I get my lot numbers correct. I wanted to make sure that when they gave up lot
Okay.
21
I
that they were going all the way to the back portion and squaring it off. And that caused concern for me because then open space, even to be a smidge less, then that affects everybody. And then we have to
And then, yep.
do a wider
everybody has to come
advertisement.
in.
So
Okay.
that my
Okay.
recommendation was that
okay.
they
No, I think that's
do it at the same acreage. And then that's when they came back with the second iteration and that wedge shifted over.
just having seen enough odd lots.
Does it make
you
it
know,
less odd?
Yeah, this explains it.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to be clear, and that 10-foot walking easement, if I look at this picture, is it on this side of lot 22 or is it on the other side of lot 22?
Other side.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Just to
it's right there.
clarify. So are we moving to, this is, sorry, Chair, you're almost there. You're almost done.
Are you all done asking your questions?
Yes.
Well,
I'm
I
done.
think so. I have questions about, but that you may.
We
not
also,
know.
we have public comment and all that stuff. So I just this is questions for the applicant and for Arnie.
Yeah.
Before we have our
Um,
discussion.
I wonder, is there anything that we need to pay attention to from changing the property line, expanding different, two lots size? Is that advantaging them in some relative to all? Do we cause any problems within the whole homeowners? I don't know. That's something, because that's basically what you're doing. You're just giving two lots and you're doing it for free, right? And or
I don't know that that's necessarily true.
yeah. Okay. Well, they're okay. So they're buying this lot. Okay.
Speaking in jest.
Yeah. Okay. But okay. But are we? I mean, we haven't heard. I guess you have this posted, so and we're not hearing from anybody else. Although this would be a little detail they may not think about. But I mean, you're making these are going to be the biggest lots now on the.
Other than jealousy, but I don't know how to.
I don't know if that's
The finances of the deal they shouldn't concern us whenever there's a boundary line adjustment.
no, but the adjustment being disadvantaged other people who bought into the PUD as it was designed, because all of a sudden two lots that they thought were going to be this one size, now they're going to be becoming bigger, and that's going to have resale implications relative to their lot, I think, right? Because they're just gonna have more property. And this is one of these unforeseen impacts of doing this, what seems like a harmless boundary line adjustment.
I guess I'm assuming that the two property owners, Max Marks Homes and Catherine Hill, agreed to these terms, so that they're the two people.
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about all the other homeowners in the PUD.
But that's why it's advertised, the zoning sign
Yeah,
is there.
yeah.
Because you're right. I mean, you're right. And the HOA will have to
And
figure out.
consider
how to-
that. Yeah, I don't know that I would
Right.
consider it until I sit and look at it. So, but
Right, and then it's too late.
yeah, and then it's too late. Yeah. That's the only thing I'm thinking about. I don't know. It may not be something we need to consider, which I'll hear and I'll understand, but I don't know if we're modifying the PUD, the original PUD, by doing this adjustment to.
I can't think of anything. If there is an impact, it's marginal. And then if we take more of the public's consideration into account, I can't see that makes any impact.
Okay.
It might on the person, individual properties in the HOA, but that's not really so much for our consideration.
Okay.
And I would imagine that there'll be a proportional change to any HOA charges related to.
Yeah, and
the
that's true.
square footage.
It's just something I was thinking about. I didn't know if I'm missing something or if it just, I shouldn't be thinking about it.
I think they draft a new, I'm not sure about this, but I think whenever we move these things, this will be the 8th time. I think they write a new HOA up and recorded each time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
Oh, that's true. Kate just reminded me, we do have something in favor from the HOA president.
Who is also the homeowner. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is it in our packet?
is it, seriously, it is also the homeowner.
Really?
They should have recused themselves.
Is it in our packet? Oh, sorry. Okay.
If I may read.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mr.
please.
Dupuy, I understand the proposal to just divide lot 21 at Weatherburn Community is coming before the Lexington Planning and Development. As president of the HOA at Weatherburn, I wish to convey our recommendation that this change be made. The other two members of the board are Max Ivankoff and Paul Clancy, financial officer. The proposal is to divide lot 21 into two parts to be purchased by the two owners on either side of this lot and added to their property. The Weatherburn HOA board is in full support of this change. Lot 21 is really not large enough for placement of a house. We hope this proposal will be adopted.
Signed.
Respectfully submitted, David Dupuy, President HOA.
Who just moved and that's now.
So with that said, does once we approve it, do the property lines, even though they haven't bought it yet, the property lines get automatically moved? I mean,
Nobody lives there now.
even once we approve it, boom, or does it now have these new property lines? And so these other people, who owns that? Once we make this, once city council approves this, is it now lot 20 and 22? They own the property, maybe even before they bought it, or is that only conditioned upon the sale?
I think it all happens at the same point, at the same time when you go
Yeah, I
for
just don't-
closing. But subdivision is separate from the ownership. But I think at closing is when all that kind of magic happens at the same time.
So they'll have to have new deeds redrawn, drawn up and their
Okay.
boundaries will change and.
If you own two lots, you could do a boundary line adjustment without a deed. If you own both those properties. But if it's two different people that own them, there has to be a deed to transfer the land into those entities.
But does that, yeah, and the question is, yeah. I just know, once we get done with this, is it automatic? Once city council, is the property line? Or does it have to wait to be the property line? Does it not become the new property line until the?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Deed,
okay.
That'll happen
okay,
with the deeds.
okay,
The deeds will
okay.
reference.
Okay,
flat
so
cabinet
on the
size,
purchase.
size, Blah, blah, blah.
And if the purchase doesn't ever happen, then this doesn't happen, right? Or
Aren't they already occupied? They look occupied, or at least this one does.
The middle,
Oh, but
the
middle.
middle.
Oh, the middle.
That's
Yeah,
the-
Distribute in that
But no,
area.
if
but
it-
nobody's gonna live there ever.
I know, but what I'm saying is, what is if that property? If we move the lines before that property is actually owned, but is owned by the people on the left and the right,
Mhm.
but it's still owned by the third person, and then the sale falls through and they don't want, neither side wants to buy it. Does that mean now what is the property line?
I think that Max Mark owns the middle unused lot and the lot on the right side. That's my understanding, right?
Yep, it is.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
right
those
there.
are unsold.
They're two LLCs.
Somebody
but
lives in
right.
this one with the flag, I assume, and because it has recycling out there,
What
but
typically happens is you line it up and on the day of closing, you agreed to the purchase and then you record everything. So that kind of is all packaged up together. I don't really think that there would be an instance which I think you're concerned about, where we do the subdivision and the changing of the boundary lines. And then Max may still own the thing in the middle, but it hasn't actually transferred hands. I think that's done by the closing attorneys all during the closing and recording. And then we also have some timeframes for the final to come back to us for
And if it all
approval
falls through, then
administratively.
it reverts back to what we had before.
Doesn't get recorded, then it's not a thing.
That's right.
so then it stays
the
just
lines
like it
won't
is.
Move until the deeds
Okay.
are prepared and the plat will get recorded with those deeds.
What-
And in
What
6
we're
months-
doing is we're allowing for this to happen as opposed to saying it is done.
Yes.
All right, okay, thank you.
I have a question about the easement between 22 and 23. Is that, so the existing easement, are they required to keep that accessible, open, mowed, unlandscaped?
I don't know. I don't know that I don't know if there might be something in the covenants. It was created in this plat cabinet 5 slide 182. But I have no idea if there's any requirement of maintenance or.
Would think so because it's an easement and,
Yeah.
but again, it all depends on what's actually in the covenants and restrictions.
You can't block it.
That's true. Okay.
You
Yeah.
Put a hedge across it.
Okay.
Got a hole to go through.
I was just trying to get a picture of it, but I couldn't.
Okay, all right. Are we done with questions for the applicant and for Arnie?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna open up public comment for items, these two items that we're discussing.
Here's this, you're trying to escape.
Thank you, Pearson. Okay, I see nobody coming up for public comment, so
Were you coming?
no. They got to come up. Okay, no. All right, we're closing public comment. And now we have commission discussion and recommendation. Let's talk about item F first.
Right, so sorry, which one?
This is
F?
the PUD. To amend the plan unit development.
Well, my contribution to the discussion is I think we've thoroughly vetted it in our discussion and could. So I have no problems going forward with the motion.
I hear no motion. What motion are you talking about?
I'm so glad, I'm gonna miss you so much. Arnie has provided us a motion
Yeah, where is?
on page,
75.
So what would you all think about adding to this motion a recommendation to move the easement from the west side of lot 22 to the east side of,
I think you're
Lot
up
22.
one. I think we have to do.
oh, am I on the wrong
I
one?
think you need to go to the
What
first
page?
one. It's page 75.
Oh, yeah, I am. I'm ahead of myself.
So what were you thinking, John? Were you thinking of moving to approve or deny an amendment? Oh, no, it's
I'm just
approve.
looking- yeah, I move to approve. Add an amendment to the Weatherburn, shall I go ahead?
Yes.
Yeah.
You want me to? Okay, I move to approve an amendment to the Weatherburn Planned Unit Development Application PUD 2023-01 as presented by the applicant and with the one applicant proffered condition, which is clarify.
Right above it. Number 1. On the page before, development of the
right at
subject
the bottom.
parcel.
Where's it?
Right here.
Oh. That's part of the staff recommendation. Okay, are you all happy enough with that, with the one applicant proffered condition? There's a motion.
Second.
That's what I think.
All right, all in favor?
Wait, but
Discussion.
then I think what you were gonna propose would affect this. Like, what were you gonna say before that you
So
said
I
it's
was
really
just
the second
thinking
thing?
about, a recommendation that they move the easement from the west side of lot 22 to the east side of lot 22, which would put it onto, it's affecting the same property. Lot 22, either way, and it would move it from the other side of it to this really big open area.
Okay.
Oh, mm.
Is that
It would just be
something
a recommendation.
That's a suggestion.
in the motion or separate from the motion?
Does it matter?
I'm just wondering how you might want to handle it.
I think I would probably just do it in the motion so that it carries along.
Okay, so then we have a motion and a second, so then we have to modify
Can I ask you a question before we do that? Is this the right time to do this, as Leslie
As opposed
points
to, right.
out, as opposed to doing it? I mean, right
On
now,
page
But it has
89.
to be, because
dealing with-
if the condition we added is it has to match up with the drawings, then.
Ah,
what
right.
time? Yeah,
Okay, so yes.
okay, okay.
Yep.
So let's
So
just
we-
vote, let's vote on the current proposal and then vote it down and then make an amendment. Okay, I guess
Can
we-
we talk about the proposal? You want to move the easement from one side to the other
22 to
side?
the side that would be captured in this photo.
Then they'd have to redraw the plat.
It-
So
It's-
we would just have to completely strike, you're not,
That's what I'm struggling with. Is this just a recommendation that's separate from the motion?
Yeah.
Or because what I'm really struggling with is this meets our requirements. So
Right.
how do we take into account, is it? I don't know if it's a recommend denial unless it were, the easement were moved, but based on what? So it's,
you're also changing the property lines of the easement on the other side. Now who owns that land now? So like,
But the owners own that land. The people
it's
who
two
own lot
different
22
owners.
and 23 would still own that land. The easement would just go away. It doesn't change the ownership of the properties at all. And this would not change the ownership of the property at all either for 22. It would just put an easement across the other side of their property,
But it
which
was
has
Want to
more
make sure
space.
there's an access easement
I
through
think
that
that's the larger
is what you're
point.
trying to get to.
Yeah.
does that type of recommendation have to be advertised to the people in that
that's a
division? I
good
mean, like
point.
that,
That is a
Yes.
difference.
like what, why?
It is different.
And I would say we should not do that, but having brought up that discussion is very good. Because then the homeowners, the neighbors may hear about that and they can bring it up when it comes to
council.
council, because I don't know that that's really our place, but I think it's a good point that you bring up.
Okay, so then not a recommendation at all, not whether attached to a motion or not attached to a motion?
I think the point is it's already going to be in the minutes.
Right.
So it's going to be part of your discussion. But if after you deal with this motion, let's say affirmatively to go forward and recommend the change to the PUD with the one condition and just let that be on its own, and then just say, not through a motion necessarily, but you'd like to recommend that they consider moving the easement over, as you stated a minute ago, to the betterment of the entire development. And then that's just a statement and not really a motion.
Kind of a different way. Just make the amendment, vote on it, and if it ends up as a suggestion and it goes through, city council, then they won't have to look at the minutes. It would just be right there, and city council can decide, okay, do we need to keep this out, or should we talk to the homeowners and see this as a suggestion because we like this suggestion? So why not just put it with a suggestion? Because if we feel it important enough, then let's turn it over and include it as a suggestion to city council. Or do you not think that's a nice thing to do?
I mean, it's what you want to do. I personally will vote no on that, though I'm not against the proposal, but I don't think it should come from us. I think it should come from the neighbors and the developer.
But
There may be things that we're not taking into account, such as the wall and
okay,
how the
We-
easement goes, travels by the wall. I'm not sure if railings are required. And sort of what's already been proposed
Okay.
to the two property owners left and right, just as far as, hey, I'm going to sell this to you. And now we're recommending something perhaps significantly different. So that's why I'm struggling a little bit for guidance for you. So I apologize for that.
I would keep them separate and not included in the motion, because I think it complicates what's already been advertised. I think that the larger point is ensuring not tomorrow, next year, but in the future, that there is access to that open space.
Yeah.
And so then that can occur in two ways. That the existing easement is made accessible, or they shift it to the other side, whatever the best design solution is for where it is. So I would separate the two actions and if we want to go ahead and approve the boundary line adjustment as is, and then do what we did the last time when I brought up my issue about VDOT, and we had a very succinct recommendation at the end. The council to consider. So
Okay,
that,
so we
I would
could, so we would
separate the
make a
two.
recommendation
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
council to consider this or talk to the developer about this. Is that what you're talking about? Am I, I'm not.
Council,
I just like that it was, it's something will be written in the minutes to this effect.
Word for word with all of our norms.
Please don't, please, a nice succinct.
Give us some cool vocabulary in there too.
you do it every time.
All right, well, we have a motion and a second for the original suggestion motion, which is the one that is suggested by staff.
Mhm.
We're just talking about item F, which is the PUD. Do we want to, I feel like we're at a point where we can vote on this now that we know we have a path forward. Okay, all in favor?
Hi.
Great, thank you. That's great. And now we're going to go to the next item, which is item G.
Can I actually ask Pearson a question? Is this something that you could pass along to the developers and the homeowners association as their representative? Just make them aware that was a concern. I think that would help.
Okay, thank you, Pearson and Shannon. All right, so item G is the preliminary what's PS 2020-03? What is that for? Preliminary subdivision.
Right. Excuse me. I move, are we ready?
Mhm.
All right, I move to approve preliminary subdivision application PS 2023-04 for the boundary line adjustments and vacations in the Weatherburn subdivision in accordance with the plat showing boundary line adjustments, Weatherburn completed by Perkins and Orison as submitted by the applicant.
Second.
All right. Motion as is. Any more comments or input? Are we ready to vote? All right, let's vote. All in favor?
Hi.
Great. The motion passes and the minutes will record our recommendations and urging of the homeowners to consider accessibility and easier access to that open space. Thank you very much.
That's what we're gonna miss.
And now we're not done. There's still more. We have two extra items of new business, which is to nominate and elect the chairperson and vice chairperson for the next calendar year, not calendar year, sorry. The next, it's not a fiscal year either. It's just a
Term year.
It's a
Term year.
It's just a weird wonky year of 2023 to 2024. So we'll open up item A, which is the chairperson. I have consulted with Arnie, and I have it on good authority that Patrick Bradley would be willing and able to serve as the chairperson. So I am going to nominate Patrick Bradley as the chairperson for the next
Second,
term.
That's an excellent suggestion.
it
And
is.
it's been confirmed through other sources.
Okay, it's not just Arnie
No.
telling me. Okay.
No,
All right.
of
Any
the willingness of the person who is not here to say yes.
any discussion or are we ready to vote?
Ready to vote.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. No, I actually did not consult Arnie on the item B, so this will be a mystery to me, is electing a vice chairperson.
I recommend Shannon Spencer.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. And follows not our protocol, but our tradition of the more recent person coming in as vice chair.
Is forced into servitude.
Well, it's
Being curated
Yeah.
and
Right,
molded.
right.
seasoned.
I think that's a great suggestion as well.
Thank you. I accept this nomination.
Doesn't matter if you accept it.
All right, all in favor?
Is there a second?
Yeah, I
Oh.
think John was was that your second?
Second, yeah,
John.
yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Now, unfortunately, Pat Bradley is not here to take the gavel from my hands. So I'm going to assume the role of chairperson until the end of this meeting, and then I will officially
Wait a
pass the
minute,
gavel.
shouldn't it?
Oh,
come
should it
me?
go to Shannon? Look, I'll do it. I'm not Robert's rule of order.
I don't know.
Me.
All right, there you go. You have a
The
ceremony?
official
Wow.
casting.
All right.
Okay. So are there any other? Let's see, is there any other business? Moving on to number 6.
I do
Or the
have a
old number
planning and
6.
zoning report if you'd like to hear it.
Sure.
The advertisement requirements were changed at the state legislature. So beginning July 1st, a public hearing can be advertised no more than 14 days in advance, which of a public hearing. So that changes significantly. So for this meeting tonight, if it had required an advertisement, I would have had to advertise the previous Wednesday, not yesterday, but the week before and the week before that. So it was 2 consecutive weeks. But now I can't be more than 14 days ahead. So an advertisement for tonight would have occurred yesterday and then the Wednesday before. I don't know why they changed it, but they changed it. I didn't even know about it, and Jeremy made me aware of it. Keeping up with VML didn't help me in that particular case. So we do have a change in advertising requirements. It's not really going to affect what you see, but just be aware that they've shrunk a little bit.
So Tony, just, so it means there'll be less.
There will be less.
Okay, that's not good.
advertising. And I knew somebody was going to ask me why, and I don't know
Okay.
the intent behind it, but the legislature did pass that, and it was implemented starting in July 1st.
And can you advertise for more?
No, that's the odd thing. It says the ads cannot be more than 14 days before
more
the
than, wow.
meeting. So I could not, if I wanted to have a little bit more time beforehand, I cannot.
Okay.
So how can you do that if our newspaper, I guess our newspaper fortunately does allow you to, because it's published on Wednesdays.
Wednesdays. Now, I presume they took into account localities that have weekly papers as opposed to dailies and that type of thing. That's just a FYI. We also yesterday held our second meeting with our consultant AECom for the space needs assessment and the assessment of the building itself for City Hall. And we will have some modified and different options for sort of interior layouts for City Hall, and also for the final report for the assessment for the building itself. We're excited in City Hall about that.
Is
by
that
the
a
way.
historical building?
It is.
So we don't ever see any of the plans for that.
That is, I think, listed on its own. It's not within the downtown historic district, and I don't even think it's within the residential historic district, if I remember correctly. I think it's listed separately.
Okay.
Individually. We can also expect a conditional use permit from WNL sooner than later for the health center that they would like to place on Denny Lane next to the tennis courts and across from Woods Creek Apartments. So it was probably helpful that earlier in our discussion, we asked, because there was a need or a desire to have the attorney consult with, not the attorney general, the Commonwealth's attorney, because we are going to have that. That's a use, but it's also a use that's internal to the campus, which is another point that Jeremy made. He prefers to do these on a case by case basis because they are all going to be unique. But their timeline or expected timeline is to start construction of that in January. And if that's the case, they need to start submitting site plans and conditional use permits.
Okay. Anything else? Key annual PC milestones. Do we have anything? No updates? Okay. City council report?
We did not meet, so I don't have a report.
All right. Is there anything else before we adjourn?
Yeah, when are we is everyone going to be here the next meeting? We won't have Pat again, though.
I will be here. It will be my last meeting.
Well, the reason is I would like to take a picture of us together.
Arnie said he's gonna take us all out for beers and
No, I mean,
We're done by 6:30.
we're, it's Matt's been with 2 terms, and that's really significant. And you've been with us 1 term and
1.1,
1.1,
and a third.
and it'd be nice to have a picture of everyone before we split
But
up.
you will both be here next time. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I'll be here next week. Next, yeah. in 2
Okay,
weeks.
so we'll take a picture next time.
All right. Well,
Okay.
Blake, thank you very much for your service
You've been,
as
you've done a great
chair.
job
Do
this
it.
year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll thank you next time
Yeah.
We're
for your
finishing,
service.
we're finishing up
Thanks.
ADUs
Thanks,
next
Ray.
week, right? Like we'll be done with it. Cause that was my goal.
Right.
ADUs is gonna be done by the time I'm out of here.
Wow.
So we got,
We've got to finish it.
let's do it next week.
All right. Well, then this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Oh, wait a minute. A new chair. I think you have to ask for a motion.